Hello and welcome to the Builder's License Training Institute's class on how to get your code books ready for the Massachusetts Restricted and Unrestricted Construction Supervisor. So what this lesson is going to do is it's going to show you how to use the resources, the International Residential Code, the International Building Code, and the state amendments to those codes when preparing for your exam and how to use them during the exam. You can take these books in with you. We also provide really handy tabs that go along the side that break the book apart for you. So it makes it a lot easier to break these books down. When you get these books out in front of you, they are thick books. They're monsters, and it can be really intimidating. But once you break them down in their separate chapters and you get a good understanding of how they work, it makes it a lot easier in finding information in them, using them as a utility. So first, let's get into a little bit of your titles. What is the difference between a restricted and an unrestricted construction supervisor? A restricted construction supervisor, that is your residential builder. That's single-family homes, duplexes, and townhouses. That is not apartment buildings. That is not commercial mini malls. It's not anything that somebody is going to pay to use. Now, your unrestricted construction supervisor, that includes that commercial building. So that's going to use the IBC, the International Building Code, and that is for your commercial building, but they can also do residential. So now let's go into the IRC and just go through a little bit of information from this book. Let's break it down and make it a little bit easier to understand. So I'm going to move these two books aside and let's pull the IRC out here. As you can see, I've tabbed out this book. When you go through and tab out this book, it's really important to pay attention to the tabs and where you're putting them and why you're putting them there. This book is organized exactly as you would build a house. So it goes from Chapter 1, Scope and Application, to Chapter 2, Definitions. Then you've got Building Planning, Foundations, Floors, Wall Construction, Wall Covering, Roofs and Ceilings, Roof Assemblies, Chimneys and Fireplaces, and so on, all the way up to finishing out and finished carpentry and installing floors. And it goes exactly as you would build a house. So it tries to make it as easy for you to understand in searching for the information. The last tab in the book is going to be the index. This is a very important utility when finding information. What you're going to be doing is pulling keywords out of the questions from the exam and finding them either using the table of contents or the index. And it's really going to help you in finding that information that you need because it goes through, let's say, faceplates. Well, it goes directly to the section E4001.11 and E4002.4 of those faceplates. So it's going to point you directly to the code that you need to use to find the answer for that question. So it's a very important utility. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to real quick go over the IBC, which is the commercial side, the International Building Code, and I'll just kind of give an outline. This book is structured the exact same as the IRC. So it's structured exactly as you would build a structure. It goes scope, definitions, use and occupancy, special details, general building highlights, and so on. And I would recommend you taking some time and going over the table of contents in both of these books. Now, if you are a restricted construction supervisor, you're not going to have the IBC. You're only going to work out of the IRC. But if you are an unrestricted, you're going to use both of these books. So it's important when you come to a question to figure out if it's asking you about residential or if it's asking you about commercial. The next book we have is the amendments, the State Building Code amendments. I'm going to go through the parts of these amendments so you have a good idea of how this is structured and how these three books work together. The first part of the amendments is the 780 CMR Part 5.1. This is for the restricted construction supervisor and the unrestricted, but this works with the residential book and this makes changes in our IRC. The 780 CMR Part 5.1 has special regulations. These do not make changes to the IRC. What this does is they are a standalone section. What this is going through is it is going through your standards and qualifications, your manufactured buildings, concrete testing, and things of those natures, and it is specific to the state of Massachusetts. Also, there's an interesting change in the code structure, or the way they number the code. The R falls directly in the center of the code. So let's just go to this first code. It is 780 CMR 100.R1. So that R falls in the center. That is how you know that this is a special regulation, and it is structured the same way for the IBC special regs. So keep that in mind as you're going through this section. Also in the special regulation section, it's going to go through licensing and permits and more information that you need to go through. So this is some important information to spend some time in, to study, and really learn how it's structured. That way you can use this as a resource for yourself as you're preparing for the exam and during the exam. Now let's move on to the 780 CMR. This is going through and adding sections to that IBC, changing some information in there to make it specific to the state of Massachusetts. The last section in this book is the Architectural Access Board. This is the 521 CMR. And what this is the ADA, which most of our country uses the Americans with Disability Act. This section really is just going through and showing you how to make your structures accessible to people with disabilities. Now we're going to go through and show you how these books work together. And I'm going to start out with the IRC. And what I'd like you to do is we're going to take a highlighter. Make sure this is an important tool as you go through this lesson. We're going to go through and highlight every code in the IRC that is changed by the amendments. What this is going to do for you is it's going to expedite your search. So when you come to a question in the exam that you need to look up, you can go directly to your IRC. And if it isn't a highlighted code, then you know that you can pull the information directly out of the IRC. If it is highlighted, then you're going to move over to your amendments. So let's start out here. Let me open up the scope and administration section in both of these books. And the first code in the amendments is R101.1. And you can see we have R101.1 right over here in the International Residential Code. So I'm going to highlight that code because it is changed by the amendments. And then you have R101.2 scope. It's also changed. Then R101.3 intent. That is also affected by the amendments, and so on. So as you go through and highlight each of these sections, you're going to know very quickly during that exam if you're going to find your information in the IRC or the amendments. So for an unrestricted construction supervisor, you're also going to have this book, the IBC. So I'm going to go through a bit of information here. We are going to do the same thing we did for the IRC, highlighting all of those changes in the IBC. So I'm going to open up to the 780 CMR section, and I'll just highlight a few codes, get you started on that. That way you can go through and do the rest of the highlighting. That way these books are prepared and useful tools for you during that exam. We'll open right up to the Scope and Administration tab. And it's the same process, and I do realize that this is a time-consuming process going through and highlighting all these sections, but it's very important. We really want you to be successful in your exam. And the quickest way for you to differentiate, am I going to the IBC or the IRC or the amendments, is to have these books prepared. So we'll go through and we will look at the codes here and start highlighting. So we've got 101.1, and we have 101 in our IBC. We have 101.2. So we're going to go through and highlight every code that is changed between the amendments and the IBC. We have 101.2.1. So that is also changed. 101.3 intent. So we're going to go through and just highlight all of these codes that have been affected by the amendments. And you'll go through this whole book and highlight, and it's very time consuming, but it's going to be a useful tool to you. So muscle on through it and get it highlighted, and it will really help you out in that exam. So now that you've gone through and you have your books highlighted and you've turned them into useful tools, you also probably found that you learned quite a bit about how the code book is structured in that task. We're going to go through and we're going to bring it all together and we're going to do a problem. So let's say you come to a problem on the exam and it asks you, what is the maximum height of a stair riser? Okay, you got to think to yourself, let's pull a keyword out of there. Stair riser. Let's go to the IRC and let's say, okay, we need to find stair riser. I'm going to go directly to the index because I'm pulling that keyword out. We're going to go to stair riser in the index. So we're going to go directly to S. Okay, so here's S. And stair riser isn't in here, but what I did find was stairways, and that's at R311.7. That's getting me on the right track. So let's go to R311.7. So go directly to chapter 3, and we're going to go to 311, 301. Okay, here's R311.7. We're going to look through and we see R311.7.5.1. It's highlighted. So we know that we need to go directly to our amendments. So what we're going to do is pull out our amendments book and we are going to go to R311.7.5.1. So we're going to pull this open here and go to 311.1. 311.7.5.1, here we are. And we find that it says risers. And the first section in this code says the riser height shall not be more than 8¼ inches or 210 millimeters. That's our answer. We found it. We don't need to go any further. Mark it on the exam and move on to the next question. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to give you some test taking techniques. This is an important method to use to passing this exam. What I like to do is break the exam down into 3 stages or 3 passes through the exam. So let's say you come to the first question on the exam. You're going to read it, take 15 seconds on that question. If you don't know the answer directly off the top of your head, you're going to mark it and you're going to move on. So if you don't know it right away, move on. You don't want to get stuck on a question. You're going to go through the whole exam that way. So you're going to go through and answer all of the ones you know without opening a book. Let's say you answer 10 to 15% of the questions and you know you have those correct because you just know them. From there, we're going to make our second pass through. So you got to the last question on your first pass through. You're going to start over with the first question you skipped. At this point, you're going to crack open your books. You're going to spend at the most a minute on this pass through. So a minute per question. You're going to look for the information. If you can't find it, you're going to mark it again and you're going to skip it. And you're going to go through each of the questions this way. That way you can find the information that you need. And if you're not finding it, you move on. Once you get to the last question, you're going to start back over at the last question that you didn't answer. This time you're going to go through and answer all of the ones that you skipped. And let's say on your second pass through you got, 60-70% of the questions answered on that second pass through. So, you're left with a few questions to answer on this third pass through. You're going to go through and make your best guess. You're going to spend maybe a little bit more time on each of those questions trying to figure out what that answer is, hopefully narrowing it down to maybe 2 possible correct answers, and take your best guess and you're going to answer all of them. If you use this method, you have a much higher chance of passing because you're using all of the resources that are given to you to be able to answer each question to the best of your abilities and optimize your time within that exam. Thank you so much for spending time in this lesson, going through these code books and really getting a good understanding of them. They are daunting books. They're thick, and they can be a little scary. But it's like using a table saw for the first time. At first you think, I'm probably going to cut my thumbs off for sure. And you're uncomfortable with the tool and it just scares you. but you use it. You get more comfortable with it. You learn the safety techniques of using a table saw, just like you use techniques in using these books to best fulfill their need, best fulfill your need in finding information in them and really understanding how they work. I really hope this lesson was helpful for you in getting started on that road to getting your license. Thank you very much.